now to the Italian meatballs. I've begun the recipe because it's quite a long one. You need to make the meatballs from half sausage meat and half good mince, and you season that mixture and then you roll it into balls and roll it on floured hands so they don't stick, and then fry until they're nice and brown on each side. Now, depending on how fatty the meat is and the sausage meat, you may get a little bit of fat left in the bottom of the pan, which I have, and I particularly don't like too much fat in my cooking, so I'm going to take off that fat, and that would be jolly good to use perhaps if you're doing roast potatoes at the weekend. And when you try and take off the fat, you nearly always get one of the balls in the mixture. So I've fried those meatballs, this lovely colour. You want a nice big open pan, also that's got one with a lid. Now I can see the mixture at the next stage bubbling hard, so I'm just going to turn that down. Now, to add to the fried meatballs, which will take about 10 minutes, I've got lots of flavouring, a lot of things. I've got onion, a chopped onion, and it goes. I've got some chopped mushrooms. They're button mushrooms, but I included all the stalk. And then some green pepper, which gives it a good flavour. And often in Italian recipes you get peppers because they grow freely there. And then tomato puree, about 3 tablespoonfuls there. I'm going to turn this plate up a bit. And then stock and cider, half and half, 1/4 pint of each. I didn't make that stock, I didn't have any left, and as I only needed 1/4 pint, I used a cube. Then give that a good stir. Now, what haven't I put in? The garlic. A lot of things to remember. Again, I always squeeze the garlic, then you just get the juice. Mix all that in well, let it come to the boil. Now, I haven't added any salt and pepper. Now, I did season the meatball mixture, but I still need more seasoning in this. And then I'm going to add a little bit of sugar. The sugar, with tomato puree, I often find that you have got to add just a little tiny bit of sugar. And then let that come to the boil and simmer gently for about 20 minutes, because remember, you've given the meatballs a good fry. So cover that, leave it for just about 20 minutes until it comes to look like this, and it makes its own sauce. You see that tomato puree has in fact gone to make a nice smooth sauce. Now, there's no thickening other than the little bit of flour that you had on your hands when you were rolling, and that's why it's a nice runny sauce. And I've already cooked the noodles, the tagliatelle, in boiling salted water and in plenty of salted water, and I followed the instructions on the packet with just for 5 minutes, and I drained it, and because I didn't use it at the time, I refreshed it in cold water. Now, you can see, even though I did that a few minutes ago, in fact about 15 minutes ago, as I rinsed it in all that free water, it is beautifully separate, and that is really important with the pasta, not to overcook it. Then add the pasta to the meatballs, in it goes, and that was just about 8 of those little bundles. Stir it in, and you get this lovely colour and a nice lot of sauce. And this recipe I find is very popular with teenagers. My children aren't too fond of peppers, so if I make this for the children, I leave the peppers out. And then serve it in a dish. And do you know what I haven't done? And that's put the cheese in. So let me stretch over and get the cheese. Some grated cheese actually in the mixture. It makes the thing blend together, and rather than putting it on top, I find it very nice. In we go. Up. Now watch. Into a nice shallow dish. And you can either sort of serve that absolutely at once when it's piping hot, or you can cook it in the oven, reheat it in the oven until it's piping hot in a moderate oven, but keep it covered if you're doing that. Let's pop that back, that plate's off, and a little bit of chopped parsley over, which gives it lots of nice colour. There we are, let me give you the recipe. 8 ounces of best quality minced beef, 8 ounces of pork sausage meat, half a teaspoonful of salt, freshly ground black pepper, and that's for the balls, and you roll them into ball shapes and you roll them in a little flour which is on your hands. 2 tablespoonfuls of oil, 1 large onion which should be chopped, 1 large clove of garlic, 1 green pepper which should be sliced, 3 tablespoonfuls of tomato puree, 1/4 pint of cider, 1/4 pint of stock, 1/4 pound of button mushrooms which should be sliced, a little sugar to take away the acidity from the tomato puree, salt and freshly ground black pepper, 8 ounces of raw noodles, 4 ounces of mature cheddar cheese which should be grated. And the reheating time of those meatballs, about 45 minutes in a moderate oven, and you should cover it. Give it a stir from time to time. And now to spaghetti bolognese. I've left it till last because I reckon it's the one recipe that we all know that is pasta one, but mine is slightly different. I start off by frying the meat, the minced beef, about a pound, and by the way, I'm not going to give you the recipe, it's in our recipe leaflet. So fry the meat to start with, and I don't add any extra fat, I just let it draw out of the mince. Then I add celery and onion and 2 cloves of garlic, and I fry that, and then I add a little bit of thickening. That is about a tablespoonful of flour. In it goes. Mix that in well, and don't shout all over the cooker as I'm doing. And you want a nice open pan so that you can do that. Perhaps I would do better if I had a slightly deeper pan, wouldn't I? At the end of the session in the kitchen I always get a bit short of pans. Then to the other ingredients add 1/4 pint of stock, then red wine. If you've got some left, sometimes we do, you have about 1/4 pint, give or take. And by the way, if you want to keep it in the fridge in a small container, and it'll keep for about a month. Then a can of tomatoes, then a little bit of red currant jelly. Now I happen to have red currant jelly, about a tablespoon. If you haven't, use any red jam. It helps to give it a nice flavour, and it also adds to the colour. Sometimes I put the last of the cherry jam in, and that makes it very good. Then salt, lots of black pepper, and I was using wine on this particular occasion. Sometimes if you've got any cider, that's rather nice in spaghetti bolognese sauce. And this sauce I use for lasagna to layer up with the cheese sauce, and I often make much more than I'm making now in a very big pan, and maybe I'll do 3 pounds at a time and freeze some. Now you leave that, when you've given it a good stir, to simmer with a lid on until it's tender, about an hour, and then it comes just like this, a lovely rich brown colour, and it tastes and smells delicious. So cook the pasta just as I mentioned until it's in lots of water, salted water, until it's got just a bone in. Drain it and then put it into the dish. That's just enough for about 2 people. Then I've done plenty of sauce, enough for 4. Let the sauce trickle down over the top, and then as a finish a little bit of Parmesan cheese. If you haven't got Parmesan, you could use well-flavoured cheddar, a little bit of parsley, then it really does look lovely. So that's spaghetti bolognese.